Welcome to Monster Mod Customs, and this is the Sidewinder project. So, this is a 1986 Pontiac Fiero that had all the wrong problems, and that's why it is where it is right now. I'll get in here and I'll show you in a second, but just a little backstory on it. This was, since I had just finished up my truck. I say finished, it's a 4x4, it's a Jeep, it's never finished, but I don't have to work quite as much on it anymore. I wanted to do a car, and I was looking for cars for a while, never really committed to buying anything until a buddy of mine put this up for sale. Now, it didn't look like this originally when I bought it. This is after a lot of work to it, but he was willing to sell it. The only problem was it had issues, and I mean a lot of issues. It had front end damage. It had been in an accident where the person who'd had it before him managed to run it into a tree. Not critical problem, but he did manage to thread the needle and hit the target, and it just hit on the driver's frame rail. This is all space frame, so it collapsed everything up on that front end, and I'll show you that here in a second, or the lack thereof, as you can probably already tell. But the other big issue with this, as you can probably see back there, is, as with most Fieros, it has rust everywhere. I mean everywhere. The floor, the rockers, the back rails, the wheel wells, basically everywhere had rust on here, and that made this exceptionally difficult to restore, I'll say, which is why I bought the other Fiero, which has a Walkaround for it. So originally I was just going to strip the parts off of this and put them on the other Fiero, whatever I could get out of it, because this still did have very good parts. The frame and the body were the bad part. So I took a lot of parts off and I started thinking about it and decided, well, let me do something real quick. And I have a 33-inch tire I have over here that used to be for the truck. I rolled it up next to it, had a look at it, and thought, wow, that looks pretty cool. What if I just cut out all the bad parts and framed it and turned it into something else? So this is going to be a Fiero Buggy at some point in time. You can see I've already got the spacers and the tires and wheels on it. The tires are a little worn down, but it gives a good example of what the overall look will be once it's complete. Now let's do a quick walk around so you can see. As I said before, you can see we're missing a little something right there. So I've already cut down an extra hood I had that was damaged on the front end so that I could have some little bits of access here. Here is the front end. So fortunately there wasn't really any rust up on the front segments here. Unfortunately, he just happened to hit that part right there, caving the whole thing in. And I mean, it was a pretty good hit on it. Managed to knock it back probably about 10 inches and skewed the whole this side of the frame and collapsed that whole space frame section underneath the headlights. Basically took away a lot of that structure right there. Now I could have done this the correct way. I could have restored it, and that would have taken a lot of time and money in order to make that work. I would have had to basically, there was a section before this, actually it's not before it, it's right here. So right here, this section of that frame is just kind of spot welded into another section of frame. I could have cut that out, drilled the spot welds, taken out the front segment of this space frame, and really replaced the whole section. But that is an exceptional, oh wow, can't even talk today. Exceptional amount of trouble for a vehicle that is basically going to have no value anyway. So I decided, why not turn it into a buggy? So I cut the whole front end off of this thing. Now I'll be able to plate onto this, or put just something that I can screw a plate onto. I'll trim this up and get it nice and straight, and I can build a tube frame out of the front here. Retain that structure, probably give it more structure than it had, and it will look pretty good. It'll suck the front up a bit so that it gives a nice depth with the tires. It makes it look the part of being a buggy. The radiator, as you can see, is gone from here. I'll probably take this plastic trim piece out that has the spare tire and all that, since I won't be using that. I'll take that plastic trim piece out, and I will probably mount the radiator back there, just make some kind of creation and cut a hole in the hood up here in order for it to vent through. Make some fans. This is kind of the play it by ear vehicle. Just try to figure things out as I go and have fun with it. Try to make something that's cool. These wheels are 5-on-5s. It is absolutely impossible, if you know anything about Fieros. They have a 5x100 bolt pattern. Nothing has that, especially not something that can do off-road like this and have the backspacing to push it out. So I did spacers. It shouldn't be an issue. They are an inch spacer to a 5-on-5 bolt pattern. It makes it so that it clears just enough that this doesn't rub when it turns in or out. This won't be here, so there won't be anything to rub on. And the rear does not hit the edge of this spring when it compresses. It has just enough room to sneak past there. So that benefits me as far as the tires go. Obviously, when it comes down to it, these doors are going to be off. I'm going to take these completely off. This roof won't be on here either. No sunroof, no nothing. It'll be open. Windshield's the only thing that's staying. Hood is the only piece that's going to remain from the body panels. So that means the trunk lid will be gone too. The rear window will be gone. It will just be open air. But for right now, these are on here just to keep some of the water out while I'm doing some of the interior work. You can see the big hole in the floor pan there. That was all rusted out. All those floor plugs were non-existent. I was a little bit fortunate in that it wasn't further up into here. Sometimes rust can get really bad up there. The rockers don't exist anymore either. I cut them out because what I will be doing is welding in those 2x6 steel beams up under there to get a good base frame for when I go to build a cage for this. I'm going to be doing an exo cage on this. So eventually I'll weld the rockers in down there, and I'll be able to take a main hoop and put it up over the top here. That way I can have a bar going back here to support the suspension side, and I can have a bar going all the way up here. It'll cut down, tie back into the rocker at the bottom, come up front. I can basically structurally fix a lot of the problems that we're about to look at on the rear here. There's a lot of issues with that. So now to part of the problem. You can see some of what I'm talking about right here. Oh, sorry for the hand. So this is actually pretty good considering most of the time these are just non-existent. This is all rust right here. This was the battery tray. And I don't know if it's because the batteries splatter or pop or something like that, but every single Fiero I've seen has had rust in a battery tray. It happens in every one. So that'll probably get cut out at some point. I don't need that. The battery I can put anywhere. I've got the sky is the limit for this vehicle. I can put it anywhere I can make a bracket for it to fit. This is the upper frame rail, and I don't know if you can see the problem here. Maybe. Yeah. So this is also actually a pretty common problem with these cars, is that this frame rail stops existing after a while. The water gets up here, it sits here, it never leaves, and it rusts all these out. So many of these just lose this upper frame rail section, and this is a lot of work to put something back in here. It's not a ton, can be done, but the easiest part about doing this buggy is that all I have to do is cut it. I don't need any of this, since I'm going to put a tube going down here and a tube probably running around down to the bar there. I can effectively use that as the structure point for where this rail used to support. Down here you can see there's not too much in the ways of rust, which is actually pretty nice. This is the main frame right here, but it's still going to get cut off right here. This is my mount for the subframe. This is what holds the engine in. This is what keeps my lower suspension segment in. And all that mounts to this frame, which fortunately for this side, I say that, here's a warning to what's coming. This side is very nice. It actually is solid. But I'll end up cutting right here and then taking this back. This trunk lid won't be here, but basically I'll keep this frame rail segment that goes across, and I'll just cut it off right here and have it sweep back. I'll be able to support it with a bar going down to a big solid plate up here that'll weld into that. That way I can basically tie everything in structurally. This is the old 2.5 liter, I think. 2.4, something like that. It is gutless and it does not go very fast, but for a vehicle as light as this, it's surprisingly agile. I did drive this back to my house and it did handle pretty good, even with the front end damage. I never knew about the rust because these are all really well tied in panels, so it took me taking pieces apart before I knew that I was basically missing whole components on this vehicle. I knew there was rust, didn't know it was this bad, but I'll probably keep this motor in here for a while. Maybe eventually I can switch to something. I might go with a carbed short block, and then I can just get rid of all the EFI stuff. I don't have to have fuel injection. I'll just throw it in carbed, have a manual pump in there, and basically not have to worry about it. This thing will be, you know, 400 pounds lighter without all these body panels too, so should get up and go pretty quickly. This whole rear segment is going to be gone, which is fine because that bumper is not removable. All those bolts are rusted in there. Well, it might be removable because, nope, I think that's pretty solid. I was hoping that maybe the rust rusted around the bolts and it could come off, but no. It's still solid in all the ways it's not supposed to be. But we'll cut that off. I won't have to worry about it. Over here, you can see I'm missing a slight bit more of my upper frame rail. All the more reason that I need to tie in that bar up here in order to take the weight off of this. And that's part of the reason why I haven't cut this out yet. I'm worried that if I cut this out, I'm going to affect the structure of where this sits and where the rails are, and it's going to collapse in on itself. And I'll give you another look at the biggest problem with that right here. So that is the other side of my subframe mount to the main frame. This side, unfortunately, did not survive. There is almost nothing structurally around that anymore. It's holding on the back and a little bit on the underside. About half of the underside is there. That's all that's left that's holding this here. So really, I want to structurally secure this whole thing before I do any kind of big cuts and take this rear off. I'd love to see how it looks without the rear, but for now, I need to make sure I don't just collapse the whole car and make the work, you know, 3 times harder for myself. Here's the other side. This is the dashboard out of the other Fiero I have. You can see it's got some cracks and bits in it, and that's just because that one sat in the sun for so long. The dashboard that was in here went into the yellow one because it was nice. It actually wasn't cracked. A lot of this interior is actually in my other Fiero because of how well the condition was on it. Tons of junk on the floor. Ignore that. It's fine. It's normal. This is how you work on vehicles when you don't have garage space. You stick all the stuff back in the car when you're done with it. You can see that the seat is seen better days. Yeah, it's fine. It's still got padding. That's the best part. Well, some of it still has padding. But still fine. No big deal there. I do have a hole underneath the floor right here that I've got to fix. It's much smaller than the other side. You can see I still don't have any rockers. This side's getting the same treatment. The only problem I have with the floor is that where this frame comes through, right here, it has just this bulge that goes all the way down and incorporates itself into the main cab of the space frame. The bottom of this, however, had no holes, nowhere for anything to go, so it's all rusted out. I don't know why they designed it like that. It's really, really dumb design to have basically nowhere for water to go, especially when there's a hole up top here across the whole back of the frame rail that it can get into. It just can't get out. It's just asking for rust. So I've got to figure out how I want to deal with that, but structurally this thing should be pretty solid even without that back piece after I manage to work everything into the main exo cage. Wobbles a lot. Otherwise, I'll have to do some derusting work on it. I'll have to do some custom work with the coolings, and basically custom work for just about everything on here. But the best part is, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's something that I can just, you know, BS and enjoy. It's, sure, I want it to be drivable, but it doesn't need to be a show car. It's just something to have fun, ride around with on occasion. You know, show people that, hey, here's something you can do with what could have been a junked out car. And I think, even besides the tire, I think it just has a really cool look with that front tire so far forward and how big they are. And basically, we're not going to have any of that later on. I have a little cage structure going over it. I think it'll look really good when it's all done. The biggest issue, well, I'll talk about that in a second. The biggest holdback with this car is, as I said before, I don't have a lot of space. I don't have a big garage. I don't have a professional shop or anything like that to do this work in. This is all done at home. And this one, pretty much all in the driveway. In order for me to get further in this project, I need to have a tube bender. I need to be able to shape out the tubes that I'm going to be putting around it. I'll also need a source of steel, but I think that's a little bit easier than dealing with the bender itself. The bender, if you've never looked them up, they're expensive and they're bulky. Even the cheapest ones are over $1,000 easy in order to be able to do the structure work on this. And they take up a good deal of space. I just don't have a ton of space in my garage for a tube bender. So I have to split the difference. I have to find a way to make that work. And I need to commit to the investment eventually. I don't make a ton of money either, so it's a lot to just dive into $1,400, $1,500 worth of a singular tool in order to do this. And that doesn't even include the steel. Steel prices are pretty high right now, so it's a lot of extra investment that'll come out of that for something that is just kind of a side project. It's something fun to roll around in. Sure, I want to do it. I'd love to just drop the money and roll with it, but I need to be able to justify that kind of spending. So for now, I'm doing a lot of just the touch around work. I'm fixing the floorboards. I've got a piece of metal in the garage that I'm hand shaping in order to fit in these sections. I need to weld that 2x6 steel to the bottom, and then after that, I don't know where I'm going to go with this. It's going to be, I guess once I finish that up, I'm just going to have to find out what I can or can't do, and maybe make a plan for when I can get a tube bender in order to do this project, or in order to continue this project. I'd like to have this done sometime around midsummer, so I'll just have to see where the money takes me with it, whether or not I can justify the investment in other things. Maybe that'll give me a chance to make the rear bumper for the truck that I said in the Walkaround video. That would be nice, but I do want to get some usage out of it. I don't want it to just be a single project tool, and then all of a sudden I have a very, very large paperweight sitting in the garage. So that gives you an overview on what's going on with this project and what the plan is with it. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about it, if you want to know what I'm doing later on down the road, if you want to recommend to me a better way to do tube bending that doesn't involve $1,400 to $1,500 of an investment, by all means leave it down in the comments. If I'm doing something wrong, which, trust me, I do a lot of things wrong, I will never say that I do things in the safest, most effective, or most productive way. Sometimes I just don't know. Sometimes I take shortcuts when I shouldn't take shortcuts, and I'll pay for them later. But sometimes it's just basically not knowing any better. So if you know something I don't, or if you want to tell me something I don't know, by all means, leave a comment. If you like the video, please go ahead and like it. But I will see you in the next one.